Hey, welcome to or welcome back to the Being Champions podcast, where our mission is to unlock and discover the key elements that defines being a champion coach and dive into the principles that creates a culture where everyone thrives and wants to be a part of. And listen, I am super excited for today's conversation. Today I'm bringing in Craig Hillier. And you might recognize that last name, Hillier, as I had Craig's son, DJ, on just a couple episodes ago. We were talking about their book, Push the Sled, and we had an incredible conversation. And DJ's like, hey, you need to get my dad on the show. And I immediately dove into Craig's book, The High School Sports Leader. And a little bit about Craig. Craig, since 1990, has talked to over, I think, 2 million people. He loves working with students, educators, professionals. And really what we do today is we dive into the whole topic about leadership, one of my favorite topics. And here's the thing that we struggle with a lot of times with our young student athletes is we name them captains, and then we never tell them what it actually means to be a leader. We don't educate them on our end as coaches. So we do a great conversation diving into Craig's book, High School Sports Leader. We talk about the different seasons of leadership. We talk about creating a season of significance. We talk about if we're emerging as a leader, what are the qualities we're looking at? How are we showing up every single day for yourself and your teammates? How do we face this word accountability? How do we actually create more accountability within our team dynamics and our frameworks? And then we have a great conversation about how we can get better as coaches, as leaders, to ensure that we're modeling the way for our young student athlete leaders. So I walked away with this conversation with so many takeaways. So get your pens ready and please sit back and relax and enjoy this conversation with Craig Hillier. Craig Hillier, welcome to the Being Champions podcast.
Hey, it's my pleasure. It's only taken us, 3 or 4 reschedules to finally get here. I appreciate your patience. I've been traveling the country from New Mexico to Pennsylvania and Minnesota, and finally, we have an opportunity to be face-to-face. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, here we are. And Craig, I'm gonna be honest, man. Happy to reschedule. Well, first of all, what's really cool is I met your son DJ just a couple episodes ago, and we were talking about your collaboration in your book, Push the Sled. And I was telling you before we hit record, man, like I was absolutely hooked. I was, recently introduced to your work. I was listening to the Brian Kane podcast, and he was like, "Y'all need to go get this book, Push the Sled." So I dive into that book, have a great conversation with DJ, and DJ's like, yo, you need to check out my dad's work because I'm big like in the leadership space, working with our kids, trying to help our young captains. So I dove into a high school sports leader, which led me to this conversation today. So if we had to reschedule 6, 7, 8 times, I was all in. I was just super excited to meet you.
Good. Yeah, my pleasure. Let's see if we can help some people.
Yeah, let's dive right in, man. So talking about your book, High School Sports Leader, like let's talk about where you came from. So I know you've been a leadership consultant, motivational speaker since like the 90s. Like what led you on that path? What inspired you to write this book for our high school sports leaders?
Well, it started actually when I was a junior in high school. We had a basketball team that had a lot of talent, and there was some team chemistry issues. There was a couple of suspensions that happened, and the coach, when the season was done, said, this has got to change, and it's going to begin with leaders. And he simply asked everybody, who do you know? Who do you trust? Who's going to lead this team, not just in the sport, but in the lunchroom, in the weight room, in the classroom? And so everybody got a 3x5 card,
Yeah,
wrote down a couple of names, and the next day he stops me. He goes, hey, good news. You're one of the team captains. I'm expecting big things. I'll see you later.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that was it. It's
yeah,
like, go lead. Well, it went okay my senior year, but it could have gone better. And so being around sports and someone who loved leadership just didn't necessarily have the skill set. I had the mindset that I want to be a leader, didn't have the skill set. So it's a combo platter. You got to have both. And I started to work with church youth groups when I was in college, majored in business, minored in speech.
Yeah.
one thing led to another, and I just decided to go for it. I worked with Tony Robbins when I was in college, promoted him and around some other really big name people, and thought this is neat if you get this when you're 40 or 50, but what happens if you learn this when you're 15, 16, 17? And so that was kind of the spark. And then my second book came out, Playing Beyond the Scoreboard, in 2001. And this was like the first of its kind leadership book specific for athletics and teenagers, because most of the
Yeah.
other self development books, How to Win Friends and Influence People, The Seven Habits, they were all adult driven. Well, very few kids are really going to make that leap. And so that's where it started. And then the more that I did this, the more I'm like, well, there's some things that Beyond the Scoreboard didn't cover. And so it was a 2-year journey to make it all happen. Not 2 years every day, but really trying to find a book that was gonna get kids into the content so it's illustrated, there's color to it, there's questions, and even kids who don't like to read very much, I'm getting emails from them, or I have conversations where they show up at the conference and their book is all beat up,
Yeah.
tattered, and torn,
Yeah.
and I'm fired up because that shows that they're into the content. And so it was just trying to get beyond me, because I can only go to so many conferences every year, but to provide a resource for coaches, athletic directors, people like you to say, okay, let's have a curriculum. It's not just a
Yeah.
book, there's a curriculum behind it, and there's a real sequence. And so if folks will get into this, they will have a season that's going to be much better than crossing your fingers and just hoping that it works out.
Man, there's I'm sitting here getting all fired up, Craig. So many takeaways because I mean, I was kind of in the same boat. So for the past 5 years, Craig, I've run our own leadership academy too. Because to hit on your point, you talked about this. A lot of times we name our young high school athletes, we name them captain, and we say, "Good luck, go be a leader." And they, Craig, to be honest, they have no idea. Half of them don't even know who they are. First of all, as far as identity and how they want to lead. And I think the thing that jumped out to me, Craig, and I love this line, we open up the book. I'm going through the first couple pages, and you hit us with this line. It says, there are some team leaders who are not team captains. There are some team captains who are not team leaders. And I was just struck by that because it's one of those things like trying to identify what leadership is. So the question, Craig, is how would you define leadership? What is leadership? What does it mean to you?
Someone who's willing to work, serve, and be the difference. And what I didn't say there is necessarily positive, because in the
Yeah,
reality, there are some people who are willing to work for the kind of the detrimental side of things. They serve themselves, and their difference is how can I stink this thing up if I'm not getting enough attention coming my way? And so
right.
someone who's willing to work, serve, and make a difference, I think those are some of the key categories. And then it goes beyond it goes beyond me. And if we can look at serving instead of shining, whether you're a senior who's the starter, an all-star, or you're a sophomore who's the alternate, if we focus more on serving than shining and we put others ahead of ourselves, now all of a sudden we've got a chance to create something. And when I make that statement in the live workshop, there are some team leaders who are not team captains, and there
Yeah,
are some team captains who are not team leaders. The heads nod. And I follow up with a story about a young woman on an evaluation. She writes, I wish my teammate would have heard what you had to say. Her teammate and her friend was not selected as a team captain. So instead of thinking about serving, she was more about shining, and she pouted and was bitter the entire season. The
yeah,
team
yeah.
captains were trying to do something positive. She's in the back talking negatively about them. Well, now all of a sudden we've got a team chemistry issue. So if we could have presented a message that you don't have to be a team captain to be a team leader, now we create a season of significance. And hey, there are some teams who don't, depending on the chemistry of the the group that year, who don't even elect team captains. And so it's not something that has to happen. And we get away from the title and think about serving. Well, now all of a sudden we got a chance to do something pretty special.
I love that, and I think the thing that jumped out, man, it is you talk about this season of significance, right? And even like your second book, you're coaching or going beyond, leaning beyond the scoreboard. Craig, let's look at today's society, man, and it's like this win at all cost mentality. We've professionalized youth sports. Our kids can get an NIL deal. So when you talk about a season of significance, what does that mean to you? And what are some of the challenges we face when we're trying to create this atmosphere and environment for our teams?
What's a challenge is when you hear a season of significance. It's easy to maybe snicker and go, yeah, that's cute. So
Yeah.
significance is meaningful, it's important, and it's memorable. And winning is important. I like to win. I don't like to lose.
Right.
And everything
Yep.
I do, it doesn't matter what I'm doing, I'm competitive. What I'm trying to look at is maybe a little bit of a bigger picture. So the question becomes, can we have a meaningful, important, and memorable season, regardless of our record, even though we're striving to win and we don't want to lose? How does that happen? So, who you become, as Dr. Jim Lair says, who you become as a result of the chase is
Yes.
the most important thing. A small percentage of students are going to be able to go on and play at the college level and at the professional level. And there is some incredible changes with NIL money out there.
Yeah.
I'm not denying any of that. I'm just saying, can for the vast majority in high school, this is probably going to be one of the last times they're going to play organized sports. And so, how do we make the most of that? And if you are going on beyond this, then let's make sure that we become the leader who is attractive to someone who is recruiting us. You can be very talented, but if you're very selfish, they're probably going to wonder about how long are you going to stick with this program. And so creating the season of significance is really important, especially at the high school level. When you go up, college level, significance,
Yeah.
I want to win. Professional level,
Yeah.
significance, I want to win. If you can't help me do that, then I'm going to find someone who can. So that's kind of the basis of the significance.
I love it. And Craig, a lot of times when I talk to our teams and talk to our young leaders, what I try to tell them is like the trophy doesn't define who we are. Talking about what Jim Lair talks about, it's about who you become, right? And Jim Lair also talks about the power of story and using, what's the truth, what's the direction, what's the purpose, all those things. So what I try to do is I try to frame it around this whole idea of the story. What's the story we want to create? Because let's be honest, when we win the trophy, right, that feeling goes away after 3, 4, 5 days. You get the trophy, you're excited, but after 5 days, that's feeling gone. That feeling is gone. So, like what you're talking about, how can we build something that's more significant beyond just the scoreboard?
When you said that, I had to go back to my high school experience with football. On Thursday night, our coach would take us into what was called the pit, and it was an old stone stadium, and then in the back right corner with this musty dirt floor and track pads, the entire team would roll in there sweaty, stinky, and the door would shut. You couldn't see the hand in front of you,
Yeah.
but those moments where it was anybody who wanted to talk could talk. And some of the things that were shared during that time, I mean, the hair on my arm stands up when I retell the story. I can still go back to that smell. I can still go back
Yeah.
to some of the
Yeah.
voices. And we did, as far as our win-loss record, we had a great season. But when you go back and you talk with people about the reunion, at the reunion, they're talking about, I mean, do you remember the pit? And do you remember
Right. Yeah.
that feeling? So when we can create, ultimately we want to win and it's significant. It's just we have a lot of say in if it's going to be a significant season. We maybe have some influence on how many wins and losses, but no matter what, we have a lot of control on creating the season of significance.
I love it. I love how you just use that word influence. I always talk to our kids. We tell them that our influence is never neutral. And if you think about that, as us as leaders, like we always show up, we can either have a good influence or a bad influence on our teams. And thinking about that, we always hear like, there's born leaders. I don't believe there's born leaders. Like leadership is a skill. And one thing that really jumped out, Craig, is in your book, you talked about the seasons of leadership. I've never seen this before. So again, if we're looking at leadership as a skill or our young leaders who are trying to develop themselves as leaders, like what are those seasons they go through?
So the seasons of leadership, 4 seasons, sometimes you go through all 4 seasons in 15 minutes. You're learning
Yeah,
a new activity, you're learning a new drill, you go through all 4. Other times, like leadership, I mean, here I am about to be 59. I've been studying, I've been practicing, I've been implementing things on leadership my entire life. So it
yeah,
starts off in season number 1, the awakening season, where we wake up to the fact that maybe we can be more of a leader than we've been in the past. Sometimes it's through a quick nomination where if I'm doing a workshop, I'll ask the question, who's surprised that you're here today? And there are always a handful of kids. And they'll
right.
say things like, well, I didn't really think that I was the best player on the team. So why am I here? And we get confused by athletic skill and leadership skill because those are two really different things. So we wake up to the fact that we can be better. And then we move into the strengthening season. Now, you as a strength and conditioning coordinator, you know that when you go hit a workout and you hit it good, the next day you're feeling sore.
Yeah.
Well, what's
Yeah.
happening inside of the muscles is the tissue is tearing and then it's repairing. And on the repair is where we get stronger. And so our ability to know that it's not going to be perfect and leadership is imperfect and you're going to mess up more than anybody else because you stick your neck out there more than anybody else. However, with every tear comes the repair. And
Yep.
you're not going to get stronger without the repair. So the
Yep.
is where it begins. Then we go to the tricky season. That is the refining season. So
Yep.
we wake up to the fact that we can be more than we've been in the past. We start working on it. We got tear, repair. And then it feels like we hit this plateau. I'm sure in the weight room, you've seen kids hit a bench press. They hit 225. That was their goal.
Yep.
And then 235 just seems like it's just not happening no matter what they're doing. And the ability to step back, maybe get some outside influence, some eyes on it, something that they could do that's a little bit different, refine it. The better you get, the more difficult it is to improve.
Right. Yep.
The better you get, the more difficult it is to improve. And those are the seasons, though, where you're making those micro little shifts. And then season 4 is the empowering season. Now it goes from just leading a small group, my team, to being a legacy leader. And so I love to ask the question in my workshop when you were a freshman or a sophomore, who was the leader that you looked up to, admired, or respected? And what was it about that individual that made you look up to, admire, respect them? And so kids will tell a story. And then I kind of come back and I simply ask, if I come back to this school 4 years from now and you're gone, will someone share a story about you?
Right. Okay.
And that gets kids thinking about the empowering season is about planting the seeds for tomorrow. And you may plant some seeds that you never get a chance to see the fruit from, but you made the program better because you were willing to step out of your way to make a connection with maybe a student who isn't as talented, the new kid,
Yeah.
and make that bridge from it being just a season where we've got 10 weeks and we're hanging out and what's next to, boy, you look back and that was pretty special.
I love that. I love that, especially like that last piece about talking about it's almost like talking about their legacy. And I always try to challenge our kids is like your legacy isn't the goals you accomplish, it's the goals you inspire in other people. Just like you're saying, we want to plant those seeds for trees we're never going to see the shade grow and all that stuff. And what I love about the four seasons, Craig, is it almost pairs so nicely with what is it, Bruce Tuckman's four stages of team dynamics, where he's talking about forming, norming, storming, and performing. So talk to our listeners about that. How do we navigate these team dynamics that we all go through as a season progresses?
So a couple pieces on team dynamics. The form, storm, norm, perform, and then I kind of add reform on
Reforming,
top
yeah.
of that. And so
Okay.
storming is where we get together, who's on the team. Maybe it's a team where there are some cuts and we get a list. Here's who's on the team. And it's usually a little bit uncomfortable and awkward during the storm process. So we start off with the form, and then we go to the storm
Yeah.
where we know who's on the team and there's a little bit of jockeying for positions. And then when we norm, we start to figure out who's doing what. I mean, we can only have one person playing second base. So we've got to understand our role. We define our role. Hopefully it's clearly communicated. And then we go out and we perform. That sounds great, right? That's a
Yeah.
fun little
Yeah.
model. But then somebody gets hurt. There's a situation where we had a game plan in place and the lights went out. It's where I'm from. It's snowing. It's raining. Something happens. How do we reform and come back to kind of our mission of creating that season of significance? So that's where I go with that. Then the second part of team dynamics is to understand different leadership styles. In the
Yeah.
book, High School Sports Leader, the team dynamics inventory, where there's a set of 12 different questions where kids do a self evaluation and they tally up the results and they learn if they're a togetherness leader, an enterpriser, an
Yeah.
analyzer, or a motivator. And just the other day, I was in a session and we were talking about, what holds you back from being a better leader? And a young man said, I'm not real loud. I'm very loyal.
Mhm.
I'm just not real loud. And we
Right.
continued the conversation. And then another young woman said, what holds me back is I'm too vocal. I mean, I say what's on my mind,
Yeah.
and I think that turns off some people. Well, in a short period of time, I did a little rewind. I said, "Let me ask you this question." This young man, I said, "I'm just gonna guess. You said you're a football player?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "I'm just gonna guess your offensive line." He goes, "Yeah,
Yes.
that's right." So sure enough, he's a guard. And this kid, as a high togetherness, he's more of a teddy bear than
Yeah.
a grizzly bear. If he has somebody penetrate through the line and it was his block and the quarterback gets sacked, the kid just takes it to heart. And then we shift over to the young woman who is more the enterpriser. I said, what probably bugs you the most is when somebody doesn't come to you directly. Like they have an issue with you, they don't come to you directly. Or hearing all kinds of real fluffy stuff when the content is underneath. And she goes, exactly. Okay,
Yeah.
so now if I, and the kids are looking at me like, how did you know that stuff? Well, if you pay attention and you understand the four styles, I've got to be able to, as a coach, I got to be able to connect one way with the togetherness. I got to be direct with the enterpriser. I got to give some thought provoking stats to the analyzer, and I got to rah rah the motivator. Now, some
Yeah.
people go, well, I'm not going to do that. Okay, well, then you're going to be about 25 or 30% effective. But the
Yep.
best ones have the capacity as a parent, as a coach, as a teacher, what as any kind of a leader, your ability to be a little bit flexible in how you deliver the message so that it connects. If it doesn't
Yeah.
connect, great content doesn't matter. And so those are the two real key pieces on team dynamics.
I love it. And as you're talking, Craig, I kept thinking of the word connection, right? And I think that's such a critical component for leadership is I remember an interview with Steve Kerr, and he said the most important game he ever won his first year coaching was the relationship game and how he showed up for the people that followed him. So what I wanted to ask you, Craig, if we're setting the stage for our young leaders, like what are the drivers, the behaviors, like when they're showing up every single day, what are some of the things you're teaching our young leaders of how they should show up and how they can be more intentional and how they can build better connections with their teammates?
Well, you said it. I don't know if you meant to or not, but show up every day is
Yeah.
number one.
Yeah.
And there are days when you don't feel like going to practice. And while feelings are important, we just can't rely on feelings. I think Brian Kane said if we only relied on our feelings, we'd all be broken, unemployed. And so it's
Yes.
our ability to know that DJ and I use this a lot, that we get to go to practice. We don't have to go to practice. And it certainly shifts your mindset, but it's the consistency of showing up every day that creates trust in your teammates.
Yes.
The leaders who show up when we're 5-0 and everything looks rosy, that's pretty easy to do. But now when you're 1-4, how are you going to show up? And one of the
Right.
add this is one of the most important ones. One of the add-ons that I share with students is the ability to leave it in the locker.
Okay.
So if you've got something that you're dealing with, and teens today, they have a lot of great things, a lot of fun resources, technology. And then with that, there's also some detrimental things that they have to deal with that we sometimes as adults don't really understand. And so leave it in the locker means you've got something that's going on. You mentally take that and you put it into a locker, and you're thinking for the next 2 hours or so, I'm going to be where my feet are. I'm going to be
Yeah.
present in what's in front of me. Because if you're in practice and you're thinking about the drama that's going on in life, then you miss out. You're in the drama of life and you're thinking about practice, you're going to miss out. So, number one, show up every day. Second,
Yes.
to appreciate people's roles. I was in Pennsylvania a couple of weeks ago, and on two different days, when I asked what prevents you from that season of significance, what prevents you from being a better leader, this young man, both young men in this situation said, I pick on younger kids who are maybe not as talented. I got to quit that. And
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
taken back that they had that much awareness. There are gonna be some superstars, and there are gonna be some folks who are gonna sit on the bench, and it's a challenge to make that connection if you're one of the more talented individuals. But look at any sport. Let's look at basketball. Hey, 5 on 0 in practice, you're pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, what are you gonna be like when you're 5 on 5? And so you may need a kid who doesn't get a lot of playing time, but to feel like their contribution in practice, where they were, uh, mimicking another the opponent, and then the game comes around, and because of the practice, the game goes better. Hey, that's a definite win. To next piece is to be up when others are down. We can't
Okay.
fall into the trap of just looking at our record, and that's where our mood is going to be. And my suggestion is that our energy should be a notch and a half above our team's energy. So
Yeah.
if on a scale of 1 to 10, if they're at a 5, you can't come in at a 9. It's too much of a gap. So
Right.
leaders are thinking, give me a step and a half above, a notch and a half above, and then bring the team with. And of course, the higher you go, you can't live at level 9 or 10 long term. I mean, at the playoffs, yeah, but you can't live there every day. But your
Right.
ability to kind of gauge, then engage, and move along that spectrum, and then the hazing piece. I mean, this has no place in school. It can destroy a season, and some of the stuff that we've all heard about is very uncomfortable. And you can take away a whole season by
Yep.
falling into the trap of looking the other way and not stepping and saying, "This is not happening this year."
Yeah. Yeah. So many great takeaways there, Craig. I think one thing I've noticed over the years, and one piece our young athletes struggle with, is this word accountability. So when you're working with your young leaders, like we set out, our vision, we say we're gonna go after a district champion or all that, or we're living through our values, we have our standards. How do you help our young leaders? Because I know it's tough. I go through it all the time working in the high school sports level. Like, how do you hold yourself better accountable? And then how can you hold your teammates accountable?
Well, I think that part of that is culture. Are we in
Yeah.
a culture where everyone is afraid of performing? I have been around some coaches who, if you made a mistake, you sit down. Okay,
Yeah.
so now we're tentative. So we're accountable, we own the mistake, and then we're going to pay a price as a result of it. So, can we create a culture where we're calling people up versus
Yes.
calling them out?
Yeah.
That in push the sled. And when we're not afraid of being accountable because we're not afraid of the criticism of our teammates, rather, we seek the feedback without the pushback. Well,
Yeah.
now accountability becomes so crucial. However, if somebody steps up and go, "Hey, I messed up," and we hear, "Yeah, you did mess up. Nice going. What in the world are you thinking there?" Well, pretty soon people figure it out. Hey,
Yeah.
I might have messed up, but I'm not opening up my big mouth. Maybe they didn't see it. And so in my workshop, I talk about that mistakes are great moments when we can wrap our arms around it and say, we're going to learn, we're going to grow, we're going to get better. Now we've got something. But when mistakes are fatal or small little things are blown up, we're afraid. I don't know any athletes who are at their best when they're timid or
Yeah.
afraid of making a mistake. When you're at your best, when you're loose, you're free, and you're in the moment. So we create accountability by creating a culture where we know it's not going to be perfect. And then when we debrief, we detach and then we debrief. So, can we get away from the result, the action, take a serious look at it, and then go, okay, this is where we go through the well, better, how system. This is what
Yes.
we're going to do
Yep.
as a result of what we learned. We do that as a team, we do that as an individual. Well, now accountability becomes cool. We're afraid of it. No one wants to stick their neck out and admit the mistake.
I love that. And again, that's one of the things I feel like that's one of the hardest pieces. I hear from coaches all the time. It's like, we set out all the standards, but how do we actually hold ourselves accountable? So again, it's just one of these pieces that we just have to get better at as coaches and as leaders. So Craig, thinking about that, I mean, I know you've been in this game forever, right, Craig? Been working with young leaders all that time. How has leadership evolved over the years, and where do you think leadership is going, like, maybe the next 10 years?
I think there was a point where the team captain, everybody had to select them, and that's what you did. And they were really, they were we coaches were hoping they'd do something, but take care of the coin flip, meet the referees, and
Yeah.
get your name called in a cool way at the beginning. And now there's a little bit more of a collaboration that's starting to happen, and the
Yeah.
great coaches understand that the idea I can just come down from the mount and here's the program. This is what you're going to do. Those days, I think are past. And so
Yeah.
leaders can become the bridge many times between where the team is at and where the coaches is at. It's not that they're assistant coaches, they're assistant leaders though. And when we
Yes.
can create
Yeah.
some buy-in and leaders feel like they're a part of it, knowing that the coach is the coach and the coach is in charge of this program. And yet, can we create a vibe where there's a little bit of a collaboration? Because the thing that didn't happen a long time ago is if there was a problem with the coach, it usually went to the extreme. And by the time a kid made a decision, they were walking.
Yeah.
Can we prevent that and put out some of these fires ahead of time? And some of that happens by making sure we're defining roles. Three preseason questions that I just hammer to kids. Number one, what do you expect from me this year? If you're going to fly in a plane, you're coming from the great state of Florida, you come up and see me in February, there's
Yeah.
going to be a pilot and a co pilot. Both have clear roles.
Yeah.
So, do we have clear roles going into our season? Second question is, when there's an issue this year, what's our process to work through it? Every coach looks at it a little bit different, but we need to know, are we having formal meetings on Tuesdays where we're going to go through well, better, how, or is this more of a one on one? And then
Yeah.
the last thing that I asked kids to ask their coaches is, Coach, how can I help you this season?
Yeah.
What's interesting is it's rare for a kid to ask that. But
Yep.
if the coach comes back and says something like, "Hey, we have a new kid moving in and I want you to connect with them," or "I'm going to bring this student up who's only a freshman," it might be controversial, but they're going to be able to provide something to the team that is going to be beneficial as we go through the season. Well, now we start to take the drama down because drama can impact our season, can take away the season of significance. We're clear on expectations. We know how we're going to handle the problem, but we do this up front. Those questions up front create a pathway for how we're going to operate. So when you talk about the future, let's have these conversations before the season starts.
Hmm.
Off camera, you and I were talking about how fast fall goes.
Yeah.
We don't want to
Yep.
be in week 5 and start to go, okay, well, what's our process here to deal with this difficult moment? Or
Yeah.
I'm bringing a kid off the bench as a coach in basketball, and the kid's frustrated week 4 because they think they should be starting. Well, all along, my thought was, no, I have you coming off the bench for a reason as the sixth person because you bring energy, but that message wasn't communicated. So you got a kid who's frustrated, and a coach is wondering, why are you frustrated? You're coming off the bench. How does it get any better than this? But
Yeah.
had we had that conversation instead of missing each other, well, now the kid embraces that role. So I think the future happens by us being much more proactive with our leaders. I think we
Yeah.
start talking about leadership at the end of a season instead of at the beginning of the next season. Let's
Right.
create
Okay.
a council, a cabinet, something, and maybe those are that's the pool where students are selected as a captain if you go the captain route. But let's not have leadership just be something that we start thinking about 3 weeks before the season starts. Let's have this be more of a year-round piece. And when we've got them, look, the teams who have the leaders can have average talent and do exceptional things. The teams who have great talent and poor leadership can do some great things. It's an uphill battle. So when
Yeah.
we combine
Yeah.
both, I mean, we got great talent and we got great team
Yeah.
leaders. Now we have a breakthrough season.
I love that. And I think, Craig, just being respectful of your time, I have one more question for you. And I'm gonna shift this question more towards coaches. And so I always say, Craig, that leadership's not about us, but it starts with us. So what advice do you have to the coaches? How can we become better leaders so then we're modeling the way to set up our future leaders to be better than us?
We've got to do more than just go out and lead. And so pick a resource, whether it's high school sports leader, it's push the sled. There are a number of different resources out there, but let's have some common language set up and let's do that early on. So that just like we were talking about, if you work through the anticipating the challenging moments before they get there, you're going to have the challenging moments.
Yeah.
That's what sports is about,
Yeah.
overcoming those moments. But let's have a recipe for how we're going to deal with that. And when we can do that, it takes extra work. But there is something golden too about the off season, and you're going through some sort of a resource. And then the coach can use the resource as the vehicle. Hey, when you were
Yeah.
reading that story about David Kinger in Push the
Yeah.
Sled,
Yeah. Yeah.
who's kind of on our team that's like that, and how do we work with them? Or what character do you identify with? Or when you look at the different mentors who are in the book, like who are some of your mentors? And so
Yeah.
it's the book, but it becomes this vehicle for us to have this common language. And then it doesn't always have to be, well, the coach's story, because they're going to run out of stories after a little while. And sometimes
Yeah.
the coach's voice can get a little bit old. Bringing in a fresh voice, sending them to workshops, planning to bring in some outside folks, even if it's a similar message, but it's delivered in a different way. All those little pieces put together, well, now we're going to create something we look back at. And it's not just, yes, we had more wins than losses, but you get invited to weddings as a coach, or they come back to you 10 years later and they go, you can't believe this, coach. This is what I was going through. And I remember what you said. And maybe as a coach, you're like, I said that,
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
but they didn't forget it. And so
Yeah.
if we make that connection in the off season and look big picture, then this thing called high school sports is going to be something that's going to be meaningful, important, and memorable, and becomes this launch pad to the future.
I love it. And I love, Craig, how you use the word mentor. And I mean, to be honest, getting introduced to you and DJ and your work, like, again, we have this incredible resource of mentors. Just reading your book, High School Sports Leader, reading Push the Sled. I have behind the scenes over these past couple months have learned so much from both you and your son, DJ. So it's for me, it's an incredible honor to sit here and have a chance to pick your brain, learn a little bit more from you. Well, speaking of that, Craig, like if our listeners wanted to learn from you, have you as a mentor kind of in their back pocket, what's the best way for them to find your work, reach out to you, and learn from you?
Sure. It's craighillier.com, CraigHillier.com. And if they go there, they can learn more about the high school sports leader book. They can learn about Push the Sled. And then I do workshops across the country. And sometimes it's with students who are just from one school. And other times they have an athletic conference where each school brings maybe 10 to 12 people. And the fun thing there is we get students who have been across the court, across the
Yeah.
pool,
Yeah.
across the field from each other, and now they're in exercises together and having a discussion, and there's an intangible factor about getting these kids together off the field of competition that is just so much fun, and those are some of the live things, and, of course, you've got the books, and I'm here as a resource. I'm not the only resource out there. Of course, DJ's doing some great things. It's been
Yep.
fun to see him
Yep.
really grab the baton here, and, what we're hoping to do is to do more programs together where I'm doing some leadership and he's doing the mindset, and then we switch them. I mean, that would be just a heck of a lot of fun as a father-son team.
Yeah, that's the coolest thing. And before we hit record, I was saying, like my son's here with me too, and it's like there's no better feeling, right? And it's so cool that y'all got to write a book together. For me, now I got to have father and son on this show. So, Craig, I can't thank you enough. Again, like I'm constantly trying to learn from people. You've been an incredible resource for me, incredible mentor as I'm reading through this stuff and helping me become a better leader for our kids. Because that's really what it's about, man. I think leadership is we're the ones that create the environment and experience. Leadership is about that influence. So you have leveled me up, and I can't thank you enough for being on the Being Champions podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
All right, we'll catch up soon.
Okay.